All right. So it's finally time for me to get around to the how to deal with procrastination video. Ironically, this has been taking a lot of time to actually get done because I have not been able to get the time to do it yet. So there's some fun stuff there. Okay, let's dive right into it. So, to deal with procrastination, you have to understand what you're dealing with first, right? Because there's many things that people could run up against that isn't quite procrastination but feels like it. So what I'm going to classify as procrastination is the having of a goal and not following through with that goal until the last minute, if at all. So if you're sitting around and you're like, I really want to do something and I just haven't gotten around to doing stuff, but I don't know what it is, that's not procrastination. That's a bit more analysis paralysis, which is a completely different topic. So procrastination is having a goal and waiting till the last possible minute to get that goal done, if at all, right? And it's a high priority goal. That's very important. So it's not like I'll get around to the dishes and then you get that done before you go to bed. It's okay, I have to submit this job application and, go through and make sure that my resume is all cleaned up before I actually submit it, and you'll wait till 5 minutes before the deadline to actually get it done. Or I have a 15-page paper and it's due tomorrow morning and it's midnight, right? So that's procrastination. So procrastination is such a big topic that I can't adequately address it in a helpful way in a concise video without generalizing, right? So if I were to generalize the most, I would go, okay, the best way to stop procrastination is to not procrastinate. But that is not helpful to anybody. That's just me being a smartass. So 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 I'm gonna go through and break it down into two types of procrastination that I'm going to talk about. Procrastination that is induced by the external environment around you, and procrastination that is induced by your internal environment. Okay? So there's two types of procrastination that I'm going to address. Let's start off with the external. So an external procrastination would be something similar to, okay, I have this paper that I need to get done, but oh, shiny, here's social media, and then you get sucked into that for 3 hours and you go, oh crap, it's due in 3 hours, right? So all of your time gets sucked into there. Or, you want to get it done. Let's say it's vacuuming. You have to clean up the house before someone gets there. And you're like, okay, cool, I'm going to vacuum and I'm going to do all these other things. But you don't actually get around to it because the vacuum's, in your all the way up in your attic, and you have to pull out a ladder for that to actually go up there and get it. That, and then there's also the last one would be, no, I think that generally that's enough to get it out of the way. So environmental procrastination is very simple to address momentarily. There's two problems with it. And the first problem is there's a reason that your environment is in the way that it is, right? So if you weren't dealing with a cluttered environment that makes it ridiculously hard to focus and all the stuff, and that just makes you procrastinate and you just don't feel motivated, then there's a problem that isn't just the procrastination. It's well, why aren't you cleaning up your space? Why isn't it organized? And there's so many other videos on how to make sure that your space is all optimized and whatnot. The trick is you need to recognize why it is the way it is. Okay, so I'll do an example. I play the piano, right? So as I'm going through and I'm trying to play the piano and trying to keep up with it, I realized that the placement of my piano, it was all the way downstairs, which is, my room is on the second floor. It's downstairs, and I share my house with a few other people, so I got roommates, and it's in the living room with the TV. So most of the time when I'm in the mood and have the availability to play the piano, everyone else is sitting in front of the TV and watching it. So it's not a conducive space. The other problem is it's all the way in the corner of the house on the opposite side of the kitchen. So most of the time when I go downstairs, it's either to go outside or to go to the kitchen. So when I would go to the kitchen, I would be the furthest distance possible from the piano. So what I did is I took the piano and I moved it into my room. And then that made it so that I then go through and actually do it, right? So if you're procrastinating something that you want to get done, make it readily available. And then you're more likely to get it done if it's an environmental issue. So those are the ideas behind an environmental procrastination. There's something about your environment that is making you not want to get that stuff done. What you need to do, the way that you solve that, is you identify what part of your environment is making you not want to get it done, and then what can you do to change that, right? And then you have to do the third step, which is change it. So in my case, it was the piano was in a bad place for multiple reasons. It was in a bad place for me to want to practice. So what I did is I realized if I move it to my room, then I can practice in my room. And that makes it way easier for everyone because then I don't, bump heads with everyone on the TV. So I moved it to my room and I actually went through and I did it, right? And the funny part about it is it took like 2 days to actually get down there and do it, even though like a month ago I was playing the piano like an hour every day, multiple times a day. I would like sit down and I would just start playing the piano. And then people started their schedule shifted and people started to use the TV more in there, and then I kind of bumped away. So I was really playing the piano, but it took me a while to build up the momentum to actually like bring it into the room. So that's the physical thing. You identify, you figure out how to solve that, and then you execute. Great. Now, the internal procrastination is a little bit more tricky. There's many, 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 many reasons for internal procrastination, and it's probably a majority of of the cause of procrastination out there. You'd be surprised how much is external, though. So there's I'm only going to address one type of internal procrastination, and it's avoidance-induced internal procrastination. So something in you makes you want to avoid the problem. Fear of failure, that the task is too big for you to actually get done. There's like a dishonesty or a difficulty or a lack of motivation in yourself to actually get it done, right? So a dishonesty in yourself would be like oh yeah, that'll only take 5 or 10 or whatever minutes, and then you don't actually get to it because there's just some sort of thing where you're like, nah, I can push it off. So So internal procrastination is where it gets really sticky. It gets very difficult to address in a general sense because it's very case by case basis. The things that I tend to find help with internal procrastination is you follow the same steps. You identify the problem. What's stopping you? Is it you're afraid of failing on this thing? Because that's what stopped me from starting up this whole YouTube thing for a while. It was like if I genuinely try at that thing, then if I fail, I totally failed, right? But if I never put all of my effort into it, I could always fall back on the excuse of, well, I wasn't actually trying. I wasn't actually trying to get that thing done. So I was always, in this back and forth limbo, and I just went, okay, well, if nothing changes from this piece, then nothing changes, and I'm going to stay in this limbo. So I bit the bullet and I just went through with it. It's very personality driven, depending on how you deal with how you face failure in your setup. So if you're not going for it because you're afraid of failing, you're going to have to work that out to figure out why you're afraid of failing. And if you're more afraid of not doing it in the first place than you are of failing. The intimidated by the task size is way easier to solve, right? So an intimidation by task size was the problem that I ran into after I started the YouTube thing. It's a wonderful example. It just keeps going. After I started the YouTube thing, I made the commitment to go through, and after every video, I would improve just a little bit video by video, right? Now, that seems like a wonderful idea, and if you continue that, by the time you make, your 20th video, you're, 20 steps better than when you were beforehand. And I still stand by the idea behind that. The only problem is the task was too big. So what I had to do was so the task was too big. I'm gonna restart this just a little bit. The task was too big, and it kept pushing me back. It was too much of an elephant to eat, if you get the expression. But the way that I faced that, and the way that you face a task that is too big for you, is you break it down into small, manageable chunks. You have to be a little bit careful when it comes to these, because if you break it down into too simple chunks, then you're not going to get anywhere, because it's not going to feel like you're making any progress. You feel progress when you overcome a hurdle that, pushes you a little bit. So if you break the tasks into very, very simple pieces that don't feel like you're actually getting anywhere, you'll lose motivation really fast. But if they're too big, then you try to jump at it and you fall down, So you got to make sure that it's a nice balance between what's the word? You got to make sure it's a nice balance between difficulty and manageability. So here's what I did. I identified the most important pieces of that task that I needed for the constant improvement. And the biggest piece of that constant improvement task that I needed was consistency, right? Consistency is a very big thing across this whole board. I'll get into some bonus tips that are just general tips that help near the end. But consistency was very important for the YouTube video thing, because if there wasn't consistency, I wasn't outputting videos, which means that I wasn't ever actually improving. So what I did was I stripped everything else away and just said consistency. I can do consistency. That's small enough that I can do it. And I have a lot of stuff on my plate, enough so that it doesn't feel like I'm not doing anything. So there's still the achievement of actually getting it done. And so that's how I got to where I am right now, is the consistency, you know? Now that's a very nice way of looking at it and stripping it down to very simple building blocks, right? Another idea would be if you're learning a piece on the piano, right? And I tend to learn stuff via memorization rather than sheet music, but you do it one chunk at a time. You don't sit down and you try to play the entire piece all the way through if it's difficult, because you'll go through and you'll start doing it and you fumble and you fail at like the sixth measure, right? So what you do is you take 3 measures and you go over that and you read it and then you try it out. And then you're like, okay, cool, I got a grip on this. And then you go to the next 3 measures and you try that out. And then you mix them together and you go through all 6 measures and then you got it. So that's a good example for if you're intimidated by the size of the task, you break it down a little bit and then and then it makes it so it's way more accessible in your head. The last piece is like a lack of drive or motivation, usually in the form of I could just, that's going to be a short task, I can just push it off, and you kick it down you kick the can down the road. This one's really hard to get to because this tends to be, there's not really a piece of advice that I can give you that's like it's like a marketable piece of advice where it's just, okay, plug this in and you're good and go, right? When it comes to personal types of addressing problems such as this, where you aren't actually driven or motivated to get the thing done, and you don't want to be honest to yourself about that you're not actually driven and motivated to get the thing done, and that's what's stopping you, and not the fact that it's just a simple thing to do. It hurts. It's obnoxious, it's annoying, and telling it to somebody's face is usually not helpful in any manner, because it doesn't actually get them to acknowledge it. The only way you can actually start dealing with this problem is just to acknowledge that it exists. So when you sit down and you go, oh yeah, I could do that in 15 minutes, so I'm going to sit down and play video games for an hour. Give yourself just a little moment of pause and go, okay, I could do that in 15 minutes. The video game's not going anywhere. I'm going to set aside 15 minutes and get this done. And then see if it actually takes 15 minutes. And if it does, then you were right and you can actually just keep going on with your day. And if it doesn't, then you have to acknowledge that you're not quite being honest with yourself when it comes to some of these problems. And that's going to be a hard conversation to face within yourself, and that is a whole that could be a whole other video in and of itself. You just have to acknowledge that you don't want to do the thing, and then you have to choose to do that thing anyway. But don't fall into the trap of, oh, it'll take 5 minutes, and then kick it down, kick the can down the road. And that's not to say, okay, cool, well, I have this video game that I want to do, and it's timed, and my friends are going to play and all this stuff, and I really want to do it, and I don't want to do this homework right now because I want to play the video game. Like, that's totally fine. Don't be an absolute tyrant with yourself. Make sure that you negotiate with yourself and be like, cool, I'll get this task done, and then I'll play 30 minutes of video games or 50 minutes of video games or whatnot. But after the task is done and not beforehand, right? You don't pay the worker before they do the work. And you might do like a little bit, okay, I'll play 15 minutes now, and then do the work and then play 30 minutes later, and that's fine. So figure out what kind of schedule works for you, but you have to make sure that you are actually honest with yourself in, oh, it's not that it'll take this much time so I can kick it down the road. It's I'm avoiding this thing intentionally so I can choose to keep avoiding it, or I can, work something out with myself and get this to actually go through. But it's not the most helpful advice, because it would be like a 3-hour one-on-one conversation to figure out exactly why that kind of thing is happening. And by the end of it, you're probably going to be so mad at me for pointing out the problems that you're facing, because, if you were to face your problems already, you wouldn't be needing this video. And so if you got your problems pointed out to you, you'd be so mad at me that you wouldn't actually care about the things that I was saying. You just want to leave the room. So that's I've had that conversation before. It's not the greatest. So it's you just have to choose to be honest with yourself and be like, okay, I'm intentionally avoiding this. And the moment that you realize that you're intentionally avoiding it, then you can start addressing the problem. But if you always fall back on it'll only take 15 minutes, so I don't have to do it now, then you're never actually going to address the problem of why you never get your stuff done on time and why it always feels like you don't have time when you ended up spending all of your day, reading a book or playing video games or, cleaning your room because you didn't want to get to the problem. This is not the nicest of videos to put out. Oof. Oh well, onward we go. So to synthesize real quick, we have two types of procrastination. One of them is external, one of them is internal. The way in which you solve both of them is the same. You identify the problem, you figure out how you're going to deal with the problem, and then you have to make sure that you follow through with that plan that you made. Very simple. When it comes to external procrastination, it is very simple to just change your room up, change your house up, change wherever your stuff is placed, and then that will cause you to be more productive. It's very easy, very simple. It will probably go back into chaos, and that is okay. You just have to go through and figure out why it went back into chaos, and then make sure that you fix it when the problem comes up. When it comes to internal procrastination, that's a lot more of an internal chaos. You have to, face the demons that are within you so that you can address it. Some of them are more difficult than others, and sometimes it is just a framing issue where you need to just break down the problem into smaller steps, and it becomes a very simple thing for you to address. Okay, so that is that video wrapped up in a nice little bow. Now, here are some tips. Blah, blah, blah. I can keep talking. It hasn't been 23 minutes right now. Here's some tips and tricks that make it so that you can go through and unprocrastinate better. The first thing that you can do is you can have little routines or little schedules that coincide with the stuff that you already do. So for me, what I do is before I get on YouTube to watch stuff, because I tend to watch a lot of YouTube because, there's a lot of stuff out there and I enjoy some of the content that's on there, and I'll end up drawing or something while I'm watching YouTube. Before I get onto something like that, I will go through and I'll play 5 minutes of guitar, and I'll play 5 minutes of piano, and I'll go through and I'll do 5 minutes of language learning. So before I do it, I'll go through and I'll do those steps, and then that does two things. One is it makes it so that I actually go through and practice those things, which is great, and I tend to do more practice than just the allotted 5 minutes because I get sucked into piano or guitar or language. So, excuse me. It makes it so that it breaks the barrier of actually going through those problems. So, like, let's say it's homework and you're like, okay, cool, I want to start working on, or even better, because homework is a hard one. Let's say it's, okay, I want to write this story, and I realize that I watch a lot of Instagram, or I scroll a lot of Pinterest, right? Okay, so before I before I go through Instagram or Pinterest, I will go through and I will write 5 paragraphs of my story. And so you go through and you start writing 5 paragraphs of your story, and sometimes you'll only write the 5, and sometimes you'll realize that you come up for air, and 30 paragraphs later you're like, yo, that was great. So implementing it in a small way like that is game changing as long as you stick to it. So it's like, okay, I want to do this thing. I make sure that I do the step before I actually do that. It's game changing. I highly recommend it. It is very simple to implement. The next thing that you can do, the next little trip, I can keep talking. I got this. The next trick is evaluations regularly, right? So for me, and I do this a lot, so take it with a little bit of a grain of salt, but I evaluate myself multiple times a day. Now, I'm on the very high end of evaluations, right? But I go through and I do so many things that I need to make sure that I'm evaluating myself and actually getting the stuff done and not just sitting down and procrastinating. And so I'll go through and multiple times a day, I'll go, okay, so what was I doing today? What was the game plans? What were the objectives? How many of those have I gotten? What else do I want to do? And how much of those things, other things that I want to do, can I do while doing these objectives? Right? But I go through and it can be as simple as by the end of the week, you go through and did I do all of the things that I wanted to do? Okay, did I stick to my routines when I wanted to stick to when I set up the routines? Okay, so a few times I didn't stick to the routines. Good to know. I'll make sure that I do better next week. Very simple. You can do that weekly, daily, multi-day, whatever. Just make sure that when you do it, it's regularly done. And it can be regularly done based off of how many things you're doing and how hard it is to keep track of it, how often you get derailed, and how often you actually have time to do an evaluation like that. Just make sure that you're honest. It is very important to be honest. So even if you failed at the stuff, don't be like, oh, dang it, I failed. How dare I? I'm going to punish myself for that kind of thing, so I'm not going to do any social media for the rest of the week. No, bad idea. Don't do that. That helps very few people. Very few people can actually function off of that kind of thing. What you want to do is you want to go, okay, cool. I failed here, and I failed here. And then you take conscious note of that and you go, how can I do better? So that next time that these situations come up, I can improve. That's all you have to do. Just make sure that you regularly do it once a week, twice a week, 7 times a week, 130 times, however many times you need. Make sure it's regular. Make sure that there's not too much space between it so you can actually get constant improvement. The last thing, and this is more of an esoteric thing, if you have something driving you, you are way less likely to procrastinate. So if you go through and you write, I want to get this thing done, right? I want to make $1 million. I want to get 100,000 subscribers on whatever. I want to learn how to draw. I need to learn how to ride a bike. It's very difficult. It's like riding a bike. But you go through and you get a drive. I want to get good at singing. I want to learn how to play chess. I want to socialize more. XYZ. Get a drive that really genuinely drives you from like the core of your gut. You go through and you're like, yes, I wake up in the morning, I breathe in, I breathe out, and that is the thing that I'm thinking of wanting to get done. And if that drive coincides with the things that you're procrastinating with, you'll stop procrastinating them. And easy as that. So if it's socializing with people and you've been procrastinating giving your mom a call, you'll start calling your mom and your cousin and your coworker and that one pizza guy that came 2 weeks ago. You'll start socializing more because that is the thing that's pushing you forward. You just have to figure out what that is, figure out how to get it, and then figure out how you build your schedule around that so you can improve in other areas that you also want to as well, while still progressing the drive. that would be an entirely different 30-minute video. And so I don't have a script for that right now, but I do have a bonus story. So I was thinking about it, and one of the reasons, and it came to me while I was talking, this is where I get warning, this is where the advice consistency stops. I'm going off script. Just so you're aware. I was thinking about how I actually knew all of these different steps, and I realized that I had gone through each of these different steps before, right? So back in 8th grade, I was the student who you could not get to do anything they didn't like. Zero, zilch. If I didn't want to do it, it would not get done. You could not drag me tooth and nail to get it. So one day my teacher sat me down and was like, hey, listen, what can I do that will actually get you to do stuff, right? Like, what'll drive you? And I went, okay, I like dark chocolate. And everyone in my class got ridiculously mad at me. They're like, how the heck, like, why the heck would you need to get rewarded to do the stuff that all of us are actually doing? Now, mind you, I started school, like genuine school, in like 6th grade, and I have a wacky school history, so this is not the video for that. But long story short, I was not a kid adapted to the schooling system. Any schooling system other than self-tutor, self-teach, get someone to sit you down and walk you through the problems, and not you sitting down at a desk all day for 8 hours a day. Now, that aside, I could legitimately come up with any reason to not do anything, to the point where when I genuinely lost homework because my cat went through and tore it up, just absolutely destroyed it, because I had left it on the counter and a little bit of food like smudged onto it, and then my cat got to it and just tore up the entire thing. And I brought in the torn up work. My teacher was asking me how I got my cat to destroy my homework. Right? It's like, so I was the person who could come up with the most legitimate reason for not doing something, and also the actual deeper reason for that is because I didn't want to do it. So just blank sheet, didn't want to do it. The cat story was true, and I wasn't actually, I had genuinely gotten my homework done that time, and that it was a really funny story. Now, fast forward a little bit. My teacher said, okay, here's the gig. I have a bar of dark chocolate. If you get these things done, then I will give you this bar of dark chocolate. Now, the thing was, it was like writing 3 pages of some sort of historical paper. Excuse me. Some sort of historical paper that like about some sort of Roman history or something. I went through and I learned cursive, because that was one of the things that got you more points on the thing, is if you wrote it in cursive. I learned cursive that night, learned the entire thing of cursive. I wrote the entire thing that night, and it was the max length that the teacher would accept, and it was written incredibly well. And it was the best paper that my teacher had received from, I think it was probably third best that she had received that year. And I got my bar of dark chocolate, and that was it. It was and so my teacher started to find workarounds, I didn't go to caveat. This was not a public school. This was a private school. So that does explain a little bit of the things. But my teacher started figuring out that if she could get me motivated to the thing, then I would go above and beyond, and then past that, and then also tangentially to get uh to get all of the things that motivated me. And props to her, because man, I was just like the worst best student you could possibly want. If I wanted something, I would go above and beyond and further than that, to the moon and back to actually get the thing done. And if I didn't care about the thing, you could not like tear my fingernails out enough to get me to even try to get the thing done. And it was it was a fun back and forth. So I appreciate my teacher for that. But that's how I know all these different methods, because I've had to teach myself to unprocrastinate. So yeah,